Okay, so obviously it's been a crazy week in the games industry, especially for me as an Xbox fan. Things have been quite wild. We've gotten, the updates from leadership, all of the articles, all of the former leadership folks giving their hot takes and all that. So what I wanted to do was after watching way too many podcasts, reading way too many articles and letters of resignation, and so on. I want to talk about five things I think Xbox could or may do. I don't really endorse all these necessarily, but I'll give the pros and cons as I see them. I want to talk about that, and then we'll kind of wrap it up at the end. Okay, so one of the things that I think they may do right off the bat is push the current series consoles uh, at a discount or something. We know that the Series X is currently, I believe, $650 at MSRP. That is pretty wild because it's been 5.5 years or whatever since it came out, and it was $499 the day it came out. I have a day one Xbox Series X that I have played for thousands of hours, I assume at this point, and it was $499. And it would be $150 more to get it today, which is pretty wild. And we know why that has happened. And with Xbox, it may be even more factors than just the tariffs and hardware price increases and things like that, right? They probably aren't making that many Series X's at this point because the previous leadership regime had pretty clearly, one, moved on to whatever they're doing next gen and kind of gave up on what they were currently doing. Now, did they do that because they just weren't moving enough units, or we don't really know those answers. I would find that hard to believe because I think a running theme of this whole generation is that they really seem to push the Series X and S pretty hard for the first year or two. But I feel like for the last like 3 or 4 years, they kind of haven't even like told people that they have an Xbox. Like it's weird. And then it tacks onto the idea that they never dropped the price. There was a time before the current prices were put in. I thought they would maybe drop the price of the Series X to like $399 or something and drop the Series S to like $250 to get rid of stock, especially as I assume they're going to start making the new console sooner and later. And then all the things happened, and I still feel like they probably jumped the gun a bit on the pricing. I will admit I don't pay super close attention to what's going on with tariffs and all that, but I am under the impression that that has relaxed for a lot of places, and I believe that they don't even make the Series X in China anymore, and that's actually made in Vietnam, I believe. I could be wrong about that. I believe that is definitely true for the next console, that we've seen those contracts and all that. But it just kind of seems like the reason they jumped the price probably isn't really as much of a concern or an issue at this point. But with how quickly that situation changes, I don't know. My whole thing is that if they are still making consoles, they need to get them on the shelves everywhere, and they need to put them out on a discount, even if that means maybe breaking even, or maybe even losing some money on it. I still think they need to remind people that they have a console currently, and they need to give it to people at a price that's affordable and makes sense, at least at the launch price, right? Like the idea of paying more for a console 5.5 years after is crazy. Now, when it comes to getting a machine to play video games on, it's not that crazy because it's probably still a good deal for most people, even at 650, because you're not going to build a computer for 650 that's much better, if at all. And obviously you have the added benefit of a computer. In theory, you can upgrade it. As someone who's built computers pretty much their entire lives, it's never quite that simple, but I don't know. It's a confusing one, but if they can, I think they should cut prices at least back to original MSRP and get those things moving as much as they can and freaking talk about them. Improve the availability outside of the US. Now, that might be a bigger task because if they already don't have that much production, then, trying to stock up and sell at a discount in the States or in North America, and then also do that everywhere else, maybe that's an issue. But, I'm under the impression that if you're overseas outside of the United States, you basically can't find Xbox hardware. And then a marketing push of some capacity. Like I said before, I don't think people even know. And obviously a lot of the ads in recent years have been really pushing the idea of like, yeah, we have an Xbox, but you could play anywhere, and that being their big push. And with the new leadership, maybe that's not going to be the case for too much longer. I think another step that they can or probably should take is to reduce the price of Game Pass, and redo how they do the benefits, or maybe how they do everything. And this is me kind of reading off other ideas that I've seen from other people. The jump to the $30 a month is just too much. I think we're at a point, and I know this for me at least, I would rather lose access to some of the benefits at a more reasonable price than pay more. I'm currently on a plan where I'm not going to have to pay for Game Pass at the new pricing until like the middle of 2027 or something. I'm paid out for quite a while. From basically whenever I found deals on Game Pass, I would buy it and then tack it on, right? And that's not going to work forever. And when that $30 a month comes up, as someone who adores Game Pass and has used it insanely to an insane degree, and I do it basically every month, I play something from it, and so I probably do get my money's worth out of it tenfold. It's still going to be hard to see that $30 a month come up along with all of my other subscriptions, right? And I really believe that we're at a moment where, of all of the things that Xbox has been pushing during this generation and during Phil's tenure, I actually believe Game Pass is the one that's most likely to change. I don't think we'll ever see Game Pass go away entirely, but what I do think is we'll see Game Pass look a lot more like PlayStation Plus and its various tiers, where we probably won't get day one Xbox first party games, at least not every single one. I could see them do something where maybe like the Xbox Game Studio games are day one on there because it's like their own thing, but maybe like the Bethesda games and the Activision Blizzard King games, maybe not. There has been talk recently of them adding more benefits, things like a World of Warcraft subscription and things like that. But all I can think about is there's no way they do that kind of stuff and then don't raise the price, right? And price raises are probably coming eventually. Now, I suspect the current one is so big, surely they're not brave enough to raise it again, at least for the next couple of years. But who knows? They could, they may have to, or at least in the way that they see it, or the way that the leadership above the people at Xbox, what they expect, may require them to raise the price, and that would become an issue even for myself. The lower price, at least lower tiers that feel like they're worth it, right? Like right now there are lower tiers. There's the lowest tier is like 10 or 15 bucks a month, or something like that, to just basically get online service, which is the whole, we'll get to that in a minute. And you get some like really old games, as part of like a Game Pass deal. And then there's the middle tier where you get more games in the online, and then the ultimate tier, where you get PC Game Pass, you get console Game Pass, you get day one, first party and all that stuff. I think they kind of need to make those lower levels especially more attractive. I don't really know how or what details that they would need to do. I just think that, like, I'm someone who probably doesn't actually need the ultimate tier, but the next tier down is so unattractive, and I'm paid out for so long that, at least for now, I'm not going to drop down. But when I actually do have to start paying it again, there's a pretty good chance I will. The removing the subscription requirement for online access, I think, is essential. If anything, just to be almost a goodwill move. And what I talk about with this is, like, if you have an Xbox, if you want to play Fortnite, even though that's a free to play game, you have to pay for the subscription, at least the base tier one, to get online access, to be able to play that game. So you can't just have an Xbox, hook up to the internet and play Fortnite. You have to have a subscription. And I feel like that would be, honestly, if they want to do a more console centric thing, which the new CEO claims that they want to, this would be a good argument to say, hey, if you want to play this game on PlayStation, even though it's a free game, you still have to pay to do it. Over here, you don't. Or just like a PC. There's been all that talk about the next Xbox being a hybrid console. Start that conversation now. Start the conversation of, hey, Xbox is just like PC. You don't have to pay to be online, unless you want to do the multiplayer and things like that. So I think that would be a thing that they could and maybe should do. And very likely, and I think this is going to happen, they're going to start treating Game Pass like a thing that you can have instead of the main product they're selling. I feel like that's been, especially this generation and with Phil, Game Pass has been everything because they thought they were going to get up to 100 million Game Pass subscribers. And, it sounds like they very likely plateaued around 30 million, which is insane. If you do the money on that now, how many people are actually paying full price, including myself? Probably not very many, but they're almost certainly still making a ton of money off of Game Pass. Now, maybe that subscription number, it's probably lower. It's probably dropped because now it's more expensive. And for the people who are paying for it monthly, I wouldn't be surprised if they dropped down tiers or dropped off entirely. And I think because it doesn't look like there's really been any actual growth in Game Pass in a while, it's, again, something they'll never fully get rid of, but I could definitely see them pare it down, maybe make it cheaper, but also give it less stuff. And maybe we see them return to Game Pass is there if you want it. It's a great thing. We love it. But we also, if you want to play your games immediately, you're going to pay full price. I think the third thing they could do, or we may see them do, is do a mandatory or at least a limited exclusivity push. This whole idea of the multi-platform thing does seem to work out for them the best of the other platforms who have dabbled in it. Now, that's also because they're the only ones who have truly, really tried it, right? PlayStation has a few games on Xbox, but it's, like MLB The Show, because the MLB, for them to keep the licensing on it, forced them to do it. And then a game like Helldivers 2, where they, it just seemed like it made sense, and it was probably a bit of an experiment. And that was a third-party developer. It wasn't a first-party developer, even though it is a first-party IP for them. And they've done that in extremely limited ways. Now, to be fair, I see people fairly often be like, well, yeah, if you want to play Xbox games, just get a PlayStation. They're putting everything over there. That's not true. Not all of, the new Xbox games or even older ones are on PlayStation. We just got news today that Starfield is probably coming to PlayStation 5 in April of 2026. I mean, that's, 2.5 years later. It's been a long time. And games like Hellblade 2 took a long time. And then there's other ones that aren't, Halo Infinite is not on PlayStation, at least not at this point. Right. And so I think that going back to a full permanent exclusivity where PlayStation doesn't get any of their games, Nintendo doesn't get any of their games, there's probably people who want that. I could probably be convinced. I don't think there's any chance it's ever going to happen. I just don't. I think, back to Phil's statements about, we aren't going to convince everyone to convert over, and libraries and the PS4, Xbox One, timeline really locked people into certain things. But what I do think is that we could see kind of like a mandated, limited exclusivity. I think we could pretty easily see them make it mandatory for a 6 to 12 month exclusivity window for every single Xbox first party game. Now, that would be probably besides Call of Duty. I don't think you'll ever see Call of Duty get restricted from other platforms. But they probably can't if they want to stay off the radar of the regulatory folks, even though that may not be an issue anymore. Who knows? But maybe it will be in a few years. That's a whole different conversation. But they absolutely could, I think, with at least some of their studios do this. Now, an idea I saw other people point out, and I don't hate it, is that it's kind of like what I said before about the Xbox game studios. We could see them go in on those and be like, Xbox game studios are all 100% exclusive to Xbox. So you're talking, the Halo studio, you're talking Double Fine, you're talking Undead Labs, you're talking, the studios that they own, Ninja Theory being one of them. I could see them make them like that. These are full exclusive. They only sell on our consoles. If you want to play these games, these awesome games that these people make, you need to come over here or go on PC. They're never getting rid of PC. That's very innate to them. But Activision, Blizzard King, Bethesda, maybe they let those become multi-platform either after a exclusivity window or not. Again, Call of Duty, they're never going to lock that up because it's too big of a money maker, even in a down year like they had with Black Ops 7. I do think I am curious to what amount of exclusivity they could do if they did like a mandatory one. You look at like a 1 or 2 years, like a 1 year, I think is pretty reasonable, but you get beyond that, and then you run into the issue that PlayStation is having, where sometimes it takes them 3-4 years to port a game from PlayStation to PC, and then it doesn't sell because there's no hype for that game anymore, even if that game is God of War or Last of Us or whatever, right? And because you lose that hype, and that's the argument for just doing it day one everywhere, because that's the most hype. It just depends on what your goals are. Are your goals to sell games, sell consoles, something in the middle? And that's what's going to inform what they do moving forward. The fourth thing is significantly improved marketing pushes. They have commercials and they do advertisements, but it absolutely has felt like a very second tier priority to Xbox for, I think, honestly, basically this whole generation. The last like impactful ad I can think of is when they previewed the Series X at the Game Awards back in 2019 or whatever it was, when they first revealed it. Other than that, I can't, that's like the last like ad that really stands out to me. And they've just become so like docile, it seems like, with marketing. And like you think back to like Halo 3 when that came out. It had that like live action trailer, which is still to this day one of the coolest things in the world. I think even Halo Infinite, I think, actually had some decent trailers, but just none of them like really went all in and were like a big deal the way that like a Halo 3 one. Now that was a different time, a different Xbox, a different game industry. I get it. But, just something to that scale again would be really cool to me. It is worth noting that as of today, I'm recording this on March 2nd of 2026. They did just post, Xbox did, 2 new like senior marketing roles. This is 1000% a Asha push, the new CEO. It's worth considering that she started her career at marketing at Microsoft, and some of that time was spent at Xbox. I believe she promoted someone into the Xbox team that she used to work with in that role, who's been, I think, never left Microsoft or has been there longer. Everyone's been talking about Asha and oh, she's an AI lady. She has been in an AI department for 2 years with Microsoft. And before that, she wasn't. Before that, she was at Instacart and Facebook and other places. And her job was to try to take things and get more people interacting with them. And that's likely, almost certainly, why she got put into the AI position that she got put into with Microsoft, because everyone knows that no one is using Microsoft's AI things, at least not, day-to-day people. And her job, so she had to take on that role as the AI person, when that probably isn't really that much of a passion to her. Just the way you see her now with Xbox, kind of trying to surround herself with that culture and, to get into the Xbox headset, mindset and figure out how to get this brand back on its feet in at least more of a way than it currently is. So, I wouldn't be surprised if we see, because of her background and the people she's bringing in, that we see them make a real big push when it comes to being more visible in marketing. And we could even see them, like, hopefully get kind of weird and kind of like aggressive again, as odd of a word as that is to put out there. I want to see them fight. Like, there's been no fight in Xbox for so long, and that's why, so much of the kind of normie conversation around it, at least like the always online people that if you're like me and you waste so much time of your life, on online conversations and stuff, that conversation is so dominated by non-Xbox fans about Xbox, because I feel like there's just, not a lot of excitement around the brand, even though there's a ton of people who like the brand or at least want to like it. And then the final thing is the next Xbox. I think that's a big deal. And I think while, they probably are a year-ish away from beginning production of that and starting to market it and all that, things can still change. I was listening to a podcast where, some of the people who are pretty informed in the industry were like, well, they have to do this PC hybrid thing. They're too far down this. They're doing all that. It probably is likely they are locked in when it comes to hardware and things like that. That the what's in the box is probably set. how we interact with the box probably isn't. The things I think are very essential for the next console are a simple and clear naming scheme. For the love of all that's good, I've often defended a lot of Xbox and not really Microsoft, but Xbox's naming practices. I don't think the series consoles are really that complicated. I don't think the Xbox One was that bad, but they weren't ideal and they weren't very friendly. I used to work at GameStop at one point. I can't imagine what it was like for these last two generations to work in like any retail store. Now, that's not really the primary place people are buying these things now, but around Christmas time or birthdays, you have that person come in who isn't a gamer, who's looking to buy stuff for these things. And I wouldn't be surprised at all, especially during the cross-gen time, that a lot of people probably bought Xbox Ones who wanted Xbox Series consoles. And we saw that, I think people talking about on like Amazon and stuff like that, it happened because there was an Xbox One X. And it sounds like people were buying that instead of a Series X because it was cheaper. And, you know, at one point that was complicated. The next Xbox needs to have the simplest name. I honestly wouldn't even care if they just called it the Xbox. You know, maybe give it a designation for, you know, assuming they'll make more hardware in the long run. We'll see. But whatever they do with it, keep it super simple. No, there should be Xbox and at most one other thing. Xbox something. No more, no series. Don't call the Series Z or is Series A or too confusing. Xbox something, and it needs to be less than 3 letters. That's my call. No variants. I think this generation, had COVID not had happened, man, that really changed so much stuff. I think I get what they were trying to do with the Series S. And I am not one of the people who thinks that the Series S like killed all these games and made it too hard for games to come out, especially now as the handhelds are getting popular, which are less powerful than the Series S. The Series S still, even to this day, is rarely less powerful than like the minimum specs for a lot of games that are coming out. I don't really think that's been as big of a deal as people think. But I do think just having 2 SKUs was confusing. I think it was just too much. There was too much going on. Or like that were 2 different consoles. Not like obviously the PlayStation has different versions, and now there's the PS5 Pro, which came later as a mid-gen refresh. But just no variants. Focus on one console, you know, make that, you know, production scale, let those prices come down a little bit instead of making 2 different things. I really think it's important for them to have a simple and clear name and to just have one thing. Here's the new thing. It's awesome. Buy it, you know, to kind of have that message. I think they should be very careful about how they market the new console. If it's going to be a hybrid device, I still think they should very much in the kind of normie space, sell it as a console. And maybe you talk about how it has, you know, you can use it kind of like a PC if you want, but its primary purpose and its primary functionality will be just like a Series X. If you start it up, your first experience, your base experience with the new console is as a console to play Xbox games, and that's what you do. Now it has this other capability, and for people who care about that and that matters to them, you know, we'll find out about that. They can make sure to message that correctly. But I do think it's very important that they don't try to go in and be like, it's a PC too, because it's going to convolute. People are going to be like, I don't want to deal with all that. I'm just going to get a PlayStation, right? It just plays games, and that's all I want. When if you can get people into the Xbox and then they realize like, I can install this, I can install that. This is really great. I think that's good to mention. It shouldn't be the primary focus of their marketing. I believe that they should subsidize the next console for at least a short time. I think the days of, like, as we know right now, consoles getting cheaper the longer they're out, doesn't seem like that's going to be a thing that happens, at least not these days. But I do believe, say this next console is going to be $1,000. I think it's going to be very important for the first like year for them to subsidize that in some capacity, for it to be 600, 700, maybe 800 max if it really is a beast of a machine. But, you know, maybe you get it to that actual price eventually. I think if you want to get a big pop in sales early and you're doing all these other things to try to increase the visibility of the console, of the brand, increase the, you know, the excitedness for it, I think as much as a lot of people, I've seen people be like, well, if it's more than $500, I'm not going to buy it. You know, the next PlayStation is probably not going to be $500. I think people are willing to accept that the next consoles are going to be $600 or $700. But I think, that's where you need to meet the market where it's at, and you can stretch it. But for a brand that's likely, as we've heard the new CEO say, trying to get that spirit back, trying to get that hype back, I think it's gonna be really important for them to be approachable when it comes to price. And if that means that they have to bite the bullet for a while to get people in, hopefully make that up with hardware or with software sales, then that's what they got to do, with the knowledge it's probably not going to last forever. And then I think they should do things like include, a year of Game Pass, or, however that looks, by the time this stuff happens. They should include some kind of things with that. Game Pass is always the easiest one to do. It's also probably the best way to hook people early. You get this new console, you load up Game Pass, you have hundreds of games that you have access to immediately, a bunch of really good games, as well as your previous library if you were already on Xbox. That'd be hard to beat. So after all this rambling, this is basically a short podcast at this point. That's how I feel. And the thing is this is the first time I feel that really anything is possible. We could see them try anything. I don't believe that the leadership would have put this person into the spot they're in to just shutter Xbox the way we've seen some former creators talk about, even though they walked it back. I don't think that this is a moment where we see them trying to sunset the brand or the console, because if they wanted to do that, say they wanted to just stop making hardware, they would have just put Matt Booty in, honestly, as a CEO, or they would have had Sarah Bond actually get the job that we all thought she was going to get. They wouldn't have brought in a young person who's climbing the corporate ladder, who's probably not going to be at Xbox that long. Let's be honest. She's going to have a more normal tenure at Xbox. It's way more normal for these people to have these kind of jobs for 4 or 5 years, maybe, and then move on, than to be like Phil and do it for 20 years. It isn't normal. Even if you look at PlayStation and Nintendo, they don't have people stay in that same or similar position for nearly as long as Phil stayed in his. And, so she's going to have 4 or 5 years to determine her legacy there. And very likely she's going to, that term is going to be her chance, maybe if anything, as a resume booster to show, Xbox what she can do, and to show Microsoft what she can do with this brand that has a lot of potential, has a lot of fans, has a lot of customers, makes a lot of money, but is in a weird spot. I like Phil. I think he seems like a good guy. I think he meant the best. I've seen other people say this too. He probably just wasn't really mean enough or hungry enough in his career to be the one who brings it back, to what it needs to be. He just, he's cool Phil, man. He likes games. He wants to take care of these studios. He wants to be a good guy, which he seems like he is. And that might not be the kind of person that Xbox needs right now. They might need like kind of a dog. They might need someone who's willing to go out there, ruffle some feathers, be kind of a jerk, and just show a little fight. I think more than anything, for Xbox fans especially, I think they want to see the brand just show a little fight, to stop feeling like they're, always quote unquote like rake stepping and things like that. They want to see the brand, seem like it wants to keep their customers and things like that, and not turn into this third-party publisher that happens to make a box if you want it, maybe, whatever. I think they want to see the Xbox go from that to, we make awesome games, we make a ton of them, we have a ton of studios, we have so many cool things that you can do through our ecosystem, and we have an awesome console, and you need to buy it because you need to access all of our cool stuff. If you want to do it in other places, whatever, fine. But that's not the best place to do it. The best place to do it is on this box that we make, and that's what you should do. To be more aggressive and more, purposeful, to show that fight. So I think that's what they're going to do, or at least I think that's what they're going to try. Whether it's successful or not, who knows? I have no idea. I will remain eternally hopeful, even if that is to my detriment. If you look at all my content, basically all the things I'm a big fan of are things that are potentially going to fail in the next 5 years or not happen. And maybe that's a personal issue. We'll discuss that another time, I guess. If you're still here, thank you so much for hanging out with me for 30 minutes. Please subscribe to the channel, especially if you're still here. Come on. Hit the like button so more people see it. Leave a comment. Let me know what you're thinking about all this stuff. If you want to do a little extra support for what I do here, consider becoming a YouTube member. You get videos like this one just a bit early, as well as a few other perks. You can see all of my other content and all of the other ways to support what I'm doing here in the links in the description of the video. That's all I've got for this one. So until next time.